Hey guys, today I want to cover Pierce. Pierce is a passive effect that you can get from certain skills or from items that allows your ranged projectiles to pierce through your targets and hit onward ones behind it. At face value, it is fairly obvious that this is going to be a beneficial effect to have on your ranged character, be it a Boazon, Javazon, or Throw Barbarian. And also, being a Boazon channel, I want to approach this video by answering the following question. Is getting a 100% chance to pierce a must for my Boazon build? So let's jump in and find out. As a Boazon, you have a number of bow skills available to you to dispatch your enemies. Some of these skills will be more appropriate than others depending on your sub build, so whether you're a multi-shot Boazon, Strafezon, or Elemental Boazon, or depending on the situation that you're in. I will talk about these skills by grouping them up into different categories. So we have single target bow skills, guided arrow, splash damage bow skills, strafe, and multiple shot or multi-shot. So first up, for single target bow skills, Pierce will grant your ranged attacks a chance to pierce through your enemies and continue on, allowing you to hit multiple targets with each arrow. For skills that shoot a single arrow in a straight line, such as Magic Arrow, Fire Arrow, Cold Arrow, and Ice Arrow, the arrow will pass through the target and continue on its course to hit more targets along its path. If you normally hit one target per arrow without Pierce, then Pierce will allow you to hit say 2, 3, or more targets in a straight line, as long as the arrow stays in flight. There also seems to be a 5 target cap on Pierce, at least according to my testing, where I would regularly hit 5 enemies with one arrow, but never 6. Regardless, to be able to hit multiple targets with a single arrow is a huge benefit over arrows that can only ever hit one target at a time. To put some numbers to this, if you have no Pierce, then your damage multiplier will in effect be 1, that is, your damage output averaged over time is the equivalent of hitting one enemy per arrow. If you have a 50% chance to pierce, then you have that much chance to pierce and hit enemy number 2, a 25% chance to pierce and hit enemy number 3, a 12.5% chance for enemy number 4, and so on. Assuming you can hit 5 enemies and chance to hit or miss is not a factor, your damage multiplier will be somewhere close to 1.9375 enemies on average per arrow. If you have a 100% chance to pierce, then you'll always pierce and hit up to 5 enemies, increasing your damage multiplier to 5 enemies per arrow. So you can see that this is huge, and if you're using Magic Arrow against groups of physical immune ghosts, you'll definitely find having a 100% chance to pierce is extremely helpful. Next on to Guided Arrow. Unlike all other single target bow skills, Pierce does not work with Guided Arrow, so it will only ever hit one target per arrow. Some previous patches of Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction did allow Guided Arrow to pierce, which would then allow each Guided Arrow to hit the same target up to 5 times. This has been patched out a long time ago, however, and was never introduced to D2R. So basically, if you're only interested in using Guided Arrow, then Pierce will not be useful for you at all. This shaman's boss name's Bonebreak and is physical immune. That's pretty funny. For splash damage bow skills, these are bow skills that shoot a single arrow that explodes on impact, such as Exploding Arrow, Immolation Arrow, and Freezing Arrow. For these skills, they work similarly to the single target bow skills covered earlier, except also explode on impact, not just on the first target, but each time the arrow hits any other target or a wall. When you have a cluster of enemies lined up closely together, you'll have an explosion on the first enemy, then depending on your pierce level, have an explosion on the second, third, fourth, and fifth enemy. Any enemies caught in the radius of any or all of those arrows will receive explosion damage for each explosion they are in range with. This means that not only will a single arrow pierce through and hit up to 5 targets, those same 5 targets will also receive splash damage from potentially all 5 explosions, increasing not only the number of targets hit per arrow, but how much damage each target receives from that arrow as well. Because of this, having 100% chance to pierce or close to it as possible is definitely a must if you're using any one of these skills as your primary skill. It's very satisfying to see entire groups of monsters shattered to a single freezing arrow. It's just a bit unfortunate that using the Mavina's Boazon set will not allow you to use Razortail, Kuko Shikaku, or Wisdom to push your pierce chance into that 100% level. Now onto the trickier skills. Strafe for the most part acts like a single target bow skill, except that it shoots multiple arrows at a much faster rate. However, unlike all the other bow skills covered so far, there is a mechanic that affects Strafe, and that is next hit delay. Next hit delay is a hidden mechanic where if an attack and its target occupy the same area, either target gets hit, then along with them potentially receiving damage, the target will get a hidden next hit delay timer applied to them. Any further attacks from the same skill or another next hit delay affected skill will then just pass through them like air until the next hit delay timer has expired. For Strafe, it applies a next hit delay timer of 4 frames or about 1/6 of a second on targets that any Strafe arrow attempts to connect with. Because of this, Strafe's damage output is dampened and does less damage than what appears in action when you're using the skill. While this won't always be the case, this will happen very often when using Strafe. For example, if all of your Strafe arrows shoot one by one at different targets, or if the targets chosen are alternated between at a slow enough rate, the next hit delay will not affect Strafe's overall damage output. However, if Strafe shoots all arrows in the same direction, say down a narrow corridor, then potentially 2 out of those 3 arrows will miss their target due to the next hit delay effect. To spell out how this works, using a Strafe that shoots at 2 frames per arrow, the first target will have their next hit delay timer triggered from arrow 1. Let's call this target tagged. Arrows 2 and 3 will then travel towards and then pass through this tagged target and hit targets behind them instead, causing those targets to also become tagged by next hit delay. Arrow 4 will travel towards the first tagged target, but this time the next hit delay timer will wear off on them, and the arrow will successfully land on them, dealing damage to them again. When you add Pierce into the picture, the first Strafe target will pierce and hit multiple targets in a straight line. This will tag all targets in a row with the next hit delay timer. Arrows 2 and 3 will miss their targets completely, and arrow 4 will hit all of their targets in a row again. And lastly, for the case where arrows quickly alternate between, say, 2 targets, there will be some damage loss there due to some arrows landing on tagged targets, but not as much as the previous narrow corridor example. The end result is that depending on the situation, having 100% Pierce will have a modest improvement in Strafe's overall damage output, or a significant one. This is, however, really hard to play test all of these scenarios, as individual Strafe arrows cannot be controlled and positioning of monsters to form multiple lines at once will be too tricky. So how do we then answer whether 100% chance to pierce is a must for Strafe? Well, no matter the case, there is definitely a benefit in reaching 100% chance to pierce for Strafe. Knowing that 100% pierce is normally attained by wearing the Razortail belt, and that for most Strafe builds, getting the 2-frame Strafe attack speed breakpoint is attainable without getting attack speed from the belt slot anyway. So unless you wish to get more survivability or faster cast rate from your belt slot depending on your use case, using Razortail and therefore getting 100% pierce this way is still likely the best option for Strafe anyway. Multiple shot is unique from all other bow skills in that it is the only bow skill that shoots multiple arrows from a single firing animation, shooting a set of arrows which all fan out at different angles. Multiple shot, like Strafe, is also affected by next hit delay, but more importantly, multi-shot can't be used as a sort of shotgun-like effect that would insta-give monsters with 22 plus arrows being shot into a single target. If one multi-shot arrow connects with a given target, then no other multi-shot arrows in the same volley will be able to deal damage to that target. In effect, each target or group of targets can only be hit once per multi-shot volley. With that in mind, a multi-shot volley shot in a very tight formation in one direction goes towards emulating how Pierce works, even without actually having any Pierce. Whereas a multi-shot volley shot in a more fanned out formation will have arrows separated out quickly, which prevents these multi-shot arrows from conflicting with each other and therefore making Pierce, when it does happen, more relevant. Because of the varying wide or narrow multi-shot arcs that can be shot with multi-shot, the varying number of arrows in each volley, all while the multi-shot blind spots start to get larger the further out the arrows move away from you, the skill is most difficult to quantify how varying amounts of Pierce will have an effect on your overall damage output. So the only practical way to discuss multi-shot and Pierce any further is to run some play testing with a number of setups. I've prepared some builds using multi-shot levels 20, 15 and 9, shooting 21, 16 and 10 arrows per multi-shot volley respectively, along with total Pierce values of 100%, 85%, 33% and 0%, creating a total of 12 combinations of builds that we will compare. All builds do the same amount of damage with 100% deadly strike, as well as having the same attack speed numbers, so each build's damage and overall DPS is as consistent as it can get. For each build, I've recorded 22 runs of the build clearing the Eldritch Pack near the Bloody Foothills waypoint. I also made sure that the Bolwazon is positioned at the same spot on the map in each run. And lastly, any run that had a Stone Skin or Holy Freeze aura spawn or had a double boss group spawn were skipped. Anyway, let's check out those results. While these times are obviously not totally linear, we can see some patterns formed in these times. Firstly, we can see that higher levels of multi-shot have a faster clear speed times than lower levels. But each target can only be hit by a multi-shot volley once, so why is that? This is due to higher level multi-shot volleys creating arrow formations that are more tightly grouped, leaving less blind spots where targets do not get hit. We also notice that high chances of pierce improve clear speeds over lower chances of pierce or no pierce at all. This is because if an arrow fails to pierce, then it will create an extra blind spot behind the target that the arrow stops at. The other thing to remember is the tests were completed by trying to kill the Eldritch pack from the same spot on the map. While this created consistent test results for us, these tests are for illustrative purposes only and do not wholly reflect the varying landscapes and situations that you may encounter. However, we have established with these tests that both a higher number of multi-shot arrows and a higher chances of pierce both contribute to the clear speeds in the testing. But there are some obvious diminishing returns as well, since the best result you can achieve with using multi-shot is just to hit all targets within the multi-shot range. So then, how do we answer the question of whether a 100% chance to pierce is a must for multi-shot? Firstly, we can compare two similarly built faith-based builds side by side, one using a Faith Diamond bow and one using a Faith Grey Matron bow. Both Faith builds can achieve the 7 frames per attack breakpoint without too much trouble, and both have very similar best-in-slot gear. A Faith Diamond bow only needs 65% increased attack speed to reach a maximum attack speed breakpoint, which can be achieved with 20% from the gloves and 45% from a circlet. A Faith Grey Matron bow needs another 30% increased attack speed on top of this to reach the maximum attack speed breakpoint, which a Cat's Eye grants another 20%, but it also requires us to change out Razortail for Nosferatu's coil for another 10% increased attack speed, dropping our total pierce chance to 90% or a bit higher. Although both setups have similar overall damage outputs, it's still more favourable to go with the Faith Grey Matron bow setup for the extra damage, as this is going to be more versatile than that extra 10% chance to pierce with the Diamond bow setup. Secondly, we need to consider different playstyles, and there's two different ones I'll cover here. The first one is to keep your distance from any danger and shoot multi-shot from afar. With this kind of playstyle, you're more likely making your way through an area and just reacting to the environment by shooting some multi-shot volleys in the direction that you notice any monsters. This playstyle tends to use more tightly grouped multi-shot volleys, so with a high enough multi-shot arrow count, that last 10% chance to pierce only amounts to being a small factor in your overall clear speeds. The second one is where you run into an area, then wait until you're somewhat surrounded and unleash your multi-shot attacks. This playstyle uses wide arc multi-shot spreads often, as this creates maximum coverage to minimize the number of multi-shot volleys needed to clear an area. Because of this playstyle benefits more from having a higher chance of pierce than the previous playstyle. However, even then, I would consider a 90% chance of pierce good enough in most situations, and certainly not worth losing an attack speed breakpoint over or downgrading your damage for. So to cap things off, skills like Freezing Arrow, Exploding Arrow, and Immolation Arrow benefit most from 100% chance to pierce, and is something that is worth striving for to get that explosion chain effect triggering as often as possible versus tightly grouped monsters. Magic Arrow also benefits greatly from having 100% chance to pierce as well. This will make dealing with tightly grouped physical immune ghosts a lot easier, but it's not an absolute necessity. And for Strafe and Multi-Shot, 100% pierce is a nice to have, but it's not something that, in my opinion, is worth sacrificing vital gear attributes for. In practice, you should see very little difference between having an 85 or 90% chance to pierce when compared to 100%. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful. I know that this video got a little bit technical towards the end. If you found this interesting but didn't quite understand everything, give the relevant sections of this video a second watch and hopefully that will solidify your understanding more. Otherwise, feel free to shoot me a question in the comments below, or connect with me and others in the BOA Discord community. Find a link to this in the video description or in the About section of this channel. Anyway, thanks for sticking around all the way till the end. Please hit that like button if you found the information in this video helpful or if you enjoyed watching this video. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on more Boazon and D2R related content. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next video.